eyes of flame, unmasking the player in the shadow game, where the silence breaks, the hidden shakes. She names the unspoken, the world away.
Oh, where's my camera? Talk about a nightmare trying to get this stream going today. Sorry for that, and I really appreciate everybody's patience. I am a little bit out of sorts, so please bear with me. I appreciate that you have all given me the opportunity to still present, because I've got an interesting story to tell today about all this Just War stuff. So I'm on my own, as you can tell. I don't have my whoopee. Sean is not available. We tried to stream it to his channel, but for whatever reason, something didn't go right. So here I am on my channel, which is not so bad. Maybe finally I can get some more views on my own channel, right? But I wanted to start today with just kind of bringing people up to speed on this whole mess with regards to the famous Trump tweet. So let me start with showing my monitor. Remember this when the Pope said this?
In English, I would simply say...
hopefully the sound is okay.
I said in the Urbi et Orbi message on Sunday, asking all people of goodwill to search always for peace and not violence, to reject war, especially a war which many people have said is an unjust war, which...
Catch that nuance. Many people have said is an unjust war.
Is continuing to escalate, and which is not resolving anything. In fact, we have a worldwide economic crisis, energy crisis, situation in the Middle East of great...
Catch the word about worldwide economic and energy crises, another key thing to keep attention on.
Stability, which is only provoking more hatred throughout the world. So come back to the table.
Instability is provoking hatred. Well, who can deny that one?
Well, let's talk. Let's look for solutions in a peaceful way. And let's remember especially the innocent, children, the elderly, the sick, so many people who have already become or will become victims of this continued warfare. To remind all that attacks on civilian infrastructure is against international law, but that it is also a sign of the hatred, the division, the destruction that the human being is capable of. And we all want to work for peace. People want peace. I would invite the citizens of all the countries involved to contact the authorities, political leaders, congressmen, to ask them, tell them to work for peace and to reject war always. Thank you very much.
Okay, before I move to the next one, I wanted to point out a few things. He talks about innocent victims of conflict, which everybody can agree. Conflict does produce extreme collateral damage where innocent people are victimized by the warring parties. He also mentioned the attacks on civilian infrastructure. Trump has been trying for a while using bombastic tweets to get people to talk about what we're going to talk about today, which we talked about last Wednesday on my show, on my chat show, but I'm going to bring it back into focus again today because that's really what's going on here. And I think it's important that we keep our perspective with all of this. Let me also show you last night's tweet or post to Truth Social by Trump. Pope Leo is weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy. He talks about fear of the Trump administration, but doesn't mention the fear that the Catholic Church and all other Christian organizations had during COVID when they were arresting priests, ministers, and everybody else for holding church services, even when going outside. Isn't that interesting how Trump brought that back in and being 10 and 20 feet apart? I like his brother Louis much better, hint, 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 back channel, than I like him because Louis is all MAGA. He gets it, and Leo doesn't. I don't want a pope who thinks it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Did you hear the Pope say that? No. I don't want a pope who thinks it's terrible that America attacked Venezuela, a country that was sending massive amount of drugs into the United States and, even worse, emptying their prisons. I just saw a statistic that showed since the actions in Central and South America with Venezuela, of course, the attacks on all the drug trafficking, that drug apprehensions have created a situation that we are now less than half of drug overdoses than we were a year ago at the same time. So that's a notable change. Okay. emptied our, where was I? Emptied our prisons, including murderers, drug dealers, and killers into our country, which we know. And I don't want a pope who criticizes the president of the United States because I'm doing exactly what I was elected in a landslide to do, setting record low numbers in crime and creating the greatest stock market in history. Leo should be thankful because, as everyone knows, he was a shocking surprise. He wasn't on any list to be pope. Well, I've also talked about that in the past, where Pope Francis actually quietly elevated the Pope now, but he elevated him to Cardinal quietly just a year before he died. Isn't that interesting? But there's no planning going on here. And was only put there by the church because he was an American, and they thought that that would be the best way to deal with the President Donald J. Trump. Actually, that was widely talked about, but I'm not sure that that's the accurate statement. But it is good that we have an American Pope, because who better to articulate what's going on in America and American culture than an American Pope, who, by the way, really wasn't an American Pope anymore. He had been in South America for so long, but that's okay. We won't get into the finer points of technicalities. Unfortunately, Leo's weak on crime, weak on nuclear weapons does not sit well with me, nor does the fact that he meets with Obama sympathizers like David Axelrod, a loser from the left, who is one of those who wanted churchgoers and clerics to be arrested. Leo should get his act together as Pope, use common sense, all caps, stop catering to the radical left, and focus on being a great pope, not a politician. It's hurting him very badly. More importantly, it's hurting the Catholic Church. President Donald J. Trump. So let me point out, anytime you're in a situation that is a politically charged environment like Iran is, anything the Pope says is going to be seen through a political lens. However, if you go back and look at what the Pope's been saying, he's been speaking from a biblical lens. People are just, challenging that. So let me now play. This is from, in response to President Trump's post last night. It's hard to hear it. He's essentially saying he's not afraid of the Pope. See if I can find my write-up. Speaking to reporters aboard the papal plane in Algeria on Monday, Pope Leo the 14th said, "I think that the people who read will be able to draw their own conclusions. I am not a politician. I have no intentions of entering into a debate with him. Rather, let us always seek peace and put an end to wars. I am not afraid of the Trump administration. I speak about the gospel. I am not a politician. I do not think the message of the gospel should be abused in the way some people are doing. I will continue to speak out loudly against war to try to promote peace, multilateral dialogue between states in order to seek the right solution to the problems. The message of the church is the message of the gospel. Blessed are the peacemakers. I do not see my role as that of a politician." He said that a few times. "I do not want to enter into a debate with him. Too many people are suffering in the world." That's an interesting rebuttal to what Trump's post was last night. And he keeps reiterating, "I'm not a politician, I'm not a politician, I'm not a politician." And then what he's talking about is people are suffering. I'm going to spend a few minutes, and pardon me, because this is a 13-minute piece, but I really think it's important that we bring this back in. So here you go.
From the bottom. So look, the United States conducted this operation with a very clear goal in mind. I haven't got a chance to see a lot of reporting. I don't understand what the confusion is. Let me explain it to you, and I'll do it once again as clearly as possible. Perhaps you'll report it that way. The United States is conducting an operation to eliminate the threat of Iran's short-range ballistic missiles and the threat posed by their Navy, particularly to naval assets. That is what it is focused on doing right now, and it's doing quite successfully. I'll leave it to the Pentagon and the Department of War to discuss the tactics behind that and the progress that's being made. That is the clear objective of this mission. The second question that's been asked is, why now? Well, there's two reasons why now. The first is it was abundantly clear that if Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond and respond against the United States. The orders had been delegated down to the field commanders. It was automatic, and in fact, it bared to be true, because in fact, within an hour of the initial attack on the leadership compound, the missile forces in the south and in the north, for that matter, had already been activated to launch. In fact, those had already been pre-positioned. The third is the assessment that was made that if we stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the President made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act. Going back to the purpose. The purpose of this is to destroy that missile capability. Why does Iran want that ballistic missile capability? What they are trying to do and have been trying to do for a very long time is build a conventional weapons capability as a shield where they can hide behind. Meaning, there would come a point where they have so many conventional missiles, so many drones, and it can inflict so much damage that no one can do anything about their nuclear program. That is what they were trying to do, is put themselves in a place of immunity where the damage they could inflict on the region would be so high that no one can do anything about their nuclear program or their nuclear ambitions. They are producing, by some estimates, over 100 of these missiles a month. Compare that to the 6 or 7 interceptors that can be built a month. They can build 100 of these a month, not to mention the thousands of one-way attack drones that they also have. They've been doing this for a very long time, and by the way, they've been doing it under sanction. You see the attacks they're conducting right now? They're attacking airports, they're attacking hotels, they're hitting not just military bases, they're attacking our embassies directly, they're attacking facilities that have nothing to do with war or with military, and that's a weakened Iran. That's in Iran despite years of sanction. Imagine a year from now, or a year and a half from now, the capabilities they would have to inflict damage on us. It's an unacceptable risk, especially in the hands of a regime that's run by radical clerics. The Ayatollah was a radical cleric. That entire regime is led by radical clerics who don't make geopolitical decisions. They make decisions on the basis of theology, their view of theology, which is an apocalyptic one. That has to be taken very seriously as well. So that was the purpose for what this operation is all about. That's what it's focused on. As the President said earlier today, it is on or ahead of schedule. I will defer to the Department of War to discuss the progress being made at a tactical level, but it was the right decision and an important decision for the safety and security of the world.
Does Congress have to weigh in? Is the President declaring war, and does Congress
No.
have to weigh in? And was there an imminent threat? Did you tell lawmakers that there was an imminent
There
threat?
absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow.
Okay, so he said they knew if Iran was attacked and they believed that they were going to be attacked. I believe they're referring to Israel here. There was an operation that Israel wanted to perform, and when Israel attempted to perform it, the U.S. had to go in and take care of this. So I believe that's where it starts, and it is the genesis of the anti-Israel rhetoric with regards to the February 26th strike. So I wanted to point that out.
Before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting higher damage. Had we not done so, there would have been hearings on Capitol Hill about how we knew that this was going to happen, and we didn't act preemptively to prevent more casualties and more loss of life.
The U.S. was forced to strike because of an impending Israeli action?
No, well, two things I would say. Number one is, no matter what, ultimately this operation needed to happen. That's the question of why now. But this operation needed to happen because Iran, in about a year or a year and a half, would cross the line of immunity, meaning they would have so many short-range missiles, so many drones, that no one could do anything about it because they could hold the whole world hostage. Look at the damage they're doing now. And this is a weakened Iran. Imagine a year from now. So that had to happen. Obviously, we were aware of Israeli intentions and understood what that would mean for us, and we had to be prepared to act as a result of it. But this had to happen no matter what.
Secretary, President Trump said overnight that his top choices to now run Iran were killed in strikes. Does the United States have a firm plan for how they intend to handle this power vacuum in Iran to ensure that an Iron hardliner does not take power?
So two things, and two things can be true. Number one is our mission and our focus is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and their ability to manufacture them, as well as the threat posed by their Navy to global shipping. That's our objective. That said, we would not mind, we would not be heartbroken, and we hope that the Iranian people can overthrow this government and establish a new future for that country. We would love for that to be possible. But the objective of this mission is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and of their naval capabilities.
So are you saying, based on that, are you saying that there is no responsibility, no plan for the U.S. to at least play a role in whatever government comes next?
We might. We'll see how circumstances play out. But I'm telling you what the objectives of this operation are. The objectives of this operation are to destroy their ballistic missile capability and make sure they can't rebuild it, and make sure that they can't hide behind that to have a nuclear program. That's the objective of the mission. That said, abundantly clear, we would love for there to be an Iran that's not governed by radical Shia clerics. As I've said myself repeatedly for years, the leadership of that country does not reflect the people of Iran, and I think that's been pretty apparent in the protests that you've seen. If there's something we can do to help them down the road, we'd obviously be open to it, but that's not the objective. The objective of this mission is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities.
The regime change has not gone well for the United States.
The what now?
Regime change has not gone well for the United States for many, many decades. How do you assure the American public that things will not get worse for the next regime that comes in there and replaces the
we would love to see this regime be replaced. And ultimately, as the president has said, he calls... No, but let me finish my answer. As the president has said, he would love for the people of Iran to use this as an opportunity to rise up and remove these leaders. They've been wanting to remove them from a long time. We've seen successive waves of protests, and we've seen them slaughter people. Okay? But the objective of this mission is to make sure they don't have these weapons that can threaten us and our allies in the region. That's why we're doing what we're doing now. And while we would love to see a new regime, the bottom line is no matter who governs that country a year from now, they're not going to have these ballistic missiles and they're not going to have these drones to threaten us. That's the objective of this mission, is to deny them the ability to use ballistic missiles to threaten their neighbors, to threaten our bases, to threaten our presence in the region, and ultimately as a shield behind which they can do whatever they want with their nuclear weapons ambition. We were not going to let them hide behind that, and that's why this was such a critical mission to undertake now while they were at their weakest point, and not a year from now where they could inflict even more damage and perhaps already be behind that point of immunity. Right here behind. Go ahead, you and then you. Yes.
Your critics in Congress have said that they should have a role, they should be able to weigh in here, and there are going to be war powers resolutions votes in Congress later this week. Why not notify Congress ahead of this, and does Congress...
Well, we did. We notified Congress. I mean, we notified the Gang of Eight. We notified congressional leadership. There's no law that requires us to do that. The law says we have to notify them 48 hours after beginning hostilities. We've done that. I think the notification went today. But we did notify members of Congress in advance. But we can't notify 535 members of Congress.
Vote to authorize the war.
Well, the Congress can vote on whatever they want, but there's no law that requires us to do that. And I want to say something, because I see people on TV. Look, that's fine. If they want to take a war powers vote, they can do that. They've done that. They've done that a bunch of times. But there's no, people keep saying that there's no law that requires the president to have done anything with regards to this. To begin with, no presidential administration has ever accepted the War Powers Act as constitutional. Not Republican presidents, not Democratic presidents. That said, we have followed the notification at 48 hours. We're here today. I've done more Gang of Eight briefings than I got in the 4 years that Biden was president and I was a member of the Gang of Eight. All of that said, we've complied with the law 100%. And we're going to continue to comply with it. We've done the notification, and we officially to Congress, but we did notify members of Congress. We just can't notify 535 people. That's not possible, but we did the Gang of Eight twice. I briefed them last week, and then I called them the night before the operation.
Can you tell us what you know, Mr. Secretary, of the administration knows about the strike on a building in southern Iran that the Iranians are saying was a school, reports of large numbers of civilians, including children, killed?
Yeah, I've seen those reports. I would refer you, not because I'm not trying to answer your question, but I don't want to get it wrong. The Department of War would be investigating that if that was our strike, and I would refer your question to them, and I'll make sure they're aware that you have that question. But we'd like to know.
An American missile.
Well, clearly, the United States would not deliberately target a school. Our objectives are missiles, both the ability to manufacture them and the ability to launch them, and the one-way attract drones. That would be our focus, and that's what we would be focused on. We would have no interest and, frankly, no incentive to target civilian infrastructure. The Iranians are, on the other hand, targeting civilian infrastructure. You guys have seen it. I'm sure you've seen it. They're hitting hotels. They're hitting embassies. They're hitting airports. They're hitting oil infrastructure. Well, it'd be very tragic, but I can't speak to the details behind it because I just don't have it. It would be a tragic outcome if it's happened. I don't have the details as to what led to it. But what is clear is that the United States would not deliberately target a school. They are, on the other hand, deliberately targeting civilians, as you've seen, because you know why? They are a terroristic regime. They sponsor terrorism and they participate in terrorism.
What's your message to Americans who are concerned about rising energy prices given the spiking of oil prices today?
Yes, and we knew that going in would be a factor, and so we have a program in place that will begin to be implemented by Secretary Wright, Secretary Bessent. We talked about it last night, again, about this program. We talked this morning, and starting tomorrow you will see us rolling out those phases to try to mitigate against that. Obviously, markets are going to be reacting to news about what's happening. And again, a reminder, think about it, okay? This terroristic regime, led by radical clerics, has the ability, potentially, to shut off 20% of global energy. That's the kind of leverage they have because of their Navy. We're going to destroy their Navy. But there is a plan in place. We anticipated this could be an issue, and Secretary Wright and Bessent will begin to roll out those steps starting tomorrow to mitigate against the impact that could have. I got to do this briefing, so I got a couple more.
Do you anticipate putting boots on the ground, and how long do you anticipate the conflict to last?
Well, we don't. Let me say two things about it. Number one, the president always has the options to undertake whatever operations he decides to do as the commander-in-chief. That said, we believe the objective that we have set for this mission, which is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities, both launch capability and manufacturing, can be achieved without ground forces. Right now, we're not postured for ground forces, but obviously the president has those options. He's never going to rule out anything. But right now, our focus is on the destruction of their ballistic missile launchers, their ballistic missile stockpiles, and their ballistic missile manufacturing capability, as well as their one-way attract drones and their Navy, because of the threat it poses to global shipping.
How long is
All right, I can only do one more. Right there in the middle. Yes, sir.
Is there a diplomatic exchange going on right now between the U.S. and Iran? Any exchanges whatsoever outside of
No, not at this time. I mean, look, we always have people that reach out from inside of governments. You don't know if they're authorized to reach out or not. They're suffering a tremendous amount of damage. Honestly, again, I'm not going to give away the details of our tactical efforts, but the hardest hits are yet to come from the U.S. military. The next phase will be even more punishing on Iran than it is right now. Someone was screaming, how long will it take? I don't know how long it'll take. We have objectives. We will do this as long as it takes to achieve those objectives, and we will achieve those objectives. The world will be a safer place when we're done with this operation. All right? Thank you, guys.
Okay, so I want to point out some obvious things here. He's talking about going after Iran's military capability, which is what we've watched them do since February 26th. They've specifically been striking at Iran's military and their ability in particular to launch ballistic missiles on their neighbors. If you caught it in there, he was saying that the intent of Iran was to build thousands of ballistic missiles, barrage their neighbors, and use that as cover while they attempted to develop their nuclear weapon. And I've been saying for a while, why now when they could have been doing that all these years? And obviously there's another impetus behind that. My theory was Khomeini had died. Nevertheless, and that's pure conspiracy, pure conjecture, because I don't have proof of that's what led to the immediate February 26th strike. But I'm also going to point out that what he talked about, the red line, has been something the United States has been very focused on for many years. I don't remember a time when they weren't. This is Marco Rubio 11 years ago about the threat that Iran poses. This is right after he came to Congress.
Mr. President, I'll be brief. I know the senator from Tennessee would like to close on this matter. I think everything that needs to be said about the details of this deal have already been said. I do want to be recorded for history's purposes before I know what was going to happen in regards to this if it goes through. Iran will immediately use the money that it's receiving in sanctions relief to begin to build up its conventional capabilities. It will establish the most dominant military power in the region outside of the United States, and it will raise the price of us operating in the region. They're going to build anti-access capabilities, rockets capable of destroying our aircraft carriers and ships, continue to build these swift boats that are able to come on us, these fast boats that are able to swarm our naval assets. And they'll make it harder and harder for U.S. troops to be in the region. They'll also work with other terrorist groups in the region to target American servicemen and women. And they may or may not deny that they're involved, but they will target us and raise the price of our presence in the Middle East until they hope to completely pull us out of that region. They'll also continue to build long-range missiles, missiles capable of reaching the United States. Those are not affected by this deal, and they'll continue to build them as they've been doing. And then at some point in the near future, when the time is right, they will build a nuclear weapon. And they will do so because at that point they will know that they have become immune, that we will no longer be able to strike their nuclear program because the price of doing so will be too high. This is not just a work of imagination. It exists in the world today. It's called North Korea, where a lunatic possesses dozens of nuclear weapons and a long-range rocket that can already reach the United States. And we cannot do anything about it. An attack on North Korea today would result in an attack on Tokyo, or Seoul, or Guam, or Hawaii, or California. And so the world must now live with a lunatic in possession of nuclear weapons. And this is the goal Iran has as well, to reach a point where they become immune to any sort of credible military threat because the price of a military strike would be too high. And then they become an established nuclear weapons power. And never in the history of the world has such a regime ever possessed weapons so capable of destruction. Iran is led by a supreme leader who is a radical Shia cleric with an apocalyptic vision of the future. He is not a traditional geopolitical actor who makes decisions on the basis of borders or simply history or because of ambitions. He has an religious apocalyptic vision of the future, one that calls for triggering a conflict between the non-Muslim world and the Muslim world, one that he feels especially obligated to trigger. And he's going to possess nuclear weapons. This is the world that we are on the verge of leaving our children to inherit. And perhaps we ourselves will have to share in it. And so I want to be recorded for history's purposes, if nothing else, to say that those of us who opposed this deal understood where it would lead. And we are making a terrible mistake. And I fear that the passage of this deal will make it even harder for us to prevent it. And I hope that there is still time to change our minds. But here's the good news. Iran may have a supreme leader, but America does not. In this nation, we have a republic, and soon we will have new leaders, perhaps in this chamber, but also in the executive branch. And I pray that on their first day in office, they will reverse this deal and reimpose the sanctions, and back them up with a credible threat of military force, or history will condemn us for not doing what needed to be done at this critical moment in the world's history. I yield the floor.
Okay, so let me give you some context with this. This is about 2 years after Rubio came to Congress. He came in, I believe, in 2013. This is in 2015. We're talking about the JCPOA. It ended up being a release of, according to Obama, monies to Iran that were put into an escrow account after the Shah was overthrown. What's interesting about those, quote, pallets of cash is that regardless of who you are, those pallets of cash, if you listen to the Treasury Department, sorry, there's my camera. If you listen to the Treasury Department, what you find out is that that money was illicit money. There were Swiss francs, it was Swiss, French, UK, there was all kinds of money on those pallets. So it wasn't just American dollars, and it didn't come out of the American Treasury. In fact, the Treasury Department themselves said the only purpose for moving the money the way they did, because of what they moved, was for illicit purposes. And one of the things we find out in 2013 is that the Zanjani network was found out. Actually, it was found out in 2012, and the U.S. sanctioned Zanjani in 2013. Who was Zanjani? If you've listened to previous shows, what you'll quickly find out is that Zanjani was using the shadow banking network for illicit purposes. And what was he doing? He was funneling money back to Iran. He was arrested by Iran, but that money was actually used to fund offshore terrorists from Iran. So the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, they were all getting that money. And for the strict purpose of waging war in the region. So we know this to be a fact. I mean, it's taken a while to prove it, but we know it to be a fact. And just so you know, like I said, this is Rubio back in 2015. I was always a very strong supporter of Marco Rubio. Where I stepped aside from him was when he worked with McCain in 2013 on the immigration deal. I've always thought he was a very articulate, very intelligent man. I met him personally. I was very impressed with him. He is actually quite humble. But I could not saddle up with what they were trying to push through for immigration reform. And so I kind of stepped away. But I will say this. What I'm seeing today is the same Marco Rubio that I came to know and love back then. And I'm really glad that that person never left, if you will. I have no idea how to explain his participation in that failed immigration deal. It did not get passed, by the way. Thank God. We fought hard. But nevertheless, this is that same Rubio. And if you listen to him then, and listen to him now, you hear the same person, and he's still saying the same thing. And what he said 11 years ago proved to be true. Why did I bring this up? We are all in a situation where this Iran thing is just lagging on. And it comes down to a just war doctrine, which I will go over here in a minute. But I'm just saying one thing that is very obvious to me is that the public doesn't even talk about this. We are either pro-Israel, anti-Israel, and you've got sides pitting against each other with regards to whether or not they believe the conflict in Israel, in Iran is justified. And Trump's bombastic posts have attempted to get this conversation going, but it wasn't until yesterday's post and the Pope's response this morning that we actually have a national conversation. Hopefully it doesn't get lost in the noise of the media, because it really is something that needs to be discussed. Here's the post we're referring to. Unfortunately, in this post, and I have a better one here. Let me see if I can pull it up. I forgot to pull it up. Let me grab it. I apologize. I forgot to pull this one up. But and it's Trump's post about it, but I'm not going to play his part. Open Google. Okay, so Trump put this post out. What's got everybody going crazy, if you look, is the edit, the obvious edit. The post actually is from early February. February 4th, I believe, is when this image was created. Trump reposted it last night after talking about the Pope being weak on crime. And I find that fascinating because he's obviously being bombastic as usual. He's gaslighting. And he then deleted the post today. What's funny about that is he put that post up about just before 10 p.m. Eastern time last night and then deletes it today. He wanted it to saturate the news cycle. And that's what makes this so funny, because this is called the Streisand effect, which we'll get into. So he deleted the post, but today what we're finding is that the whole idea of just war doctrine is being aggressively inserted into the public narrative. So when he posts that picture, with the healer image on it, in the midst of all of this panic over Iran, and then of course with what the Pope is saying, which the media loves to take out of context, I think it's time we sit down and actually look through what's going on. Obviously, the Pope said he's going to continue to speak out. Let me play this. Where's the sound?
I don't want to get into a debate with him. I don't think that the message of the gospel is meant to be abused in the way that some people are doing. And
notice how the Pope is always saying some people.
and I will continue to speak out loudly against war, looking to promote peace, promoting dialogue and multilateral relationships among the states, to look for just solutions to problems. Too many people are suffering in the world today. Too many innocent people are being killed, and I think someone has to stand up and say there's a better way to do this.
So, of course, that's the Pope's response to Trump. What's really funny about this is, of course, now Reuters picks it up. But look at where we get to. We actually are now talking about just war, something Trump's been trying to get everybody to talk to for a while. So if you look at what he's saying in context, I really think what we hit on last week about just war is really where this conversation is intended to go. The Pope really has not directly gone after Trump, but the two of them are using politically expedient means to get the public to actually talk about something that most don't want to talk about. And so while the Pope is saying he will continue to speak out against war, did you realize that today, there are strikes going on in Somalia against the Houthis? So, I mean, at what point do you separate from what's going on in Iran to some of this terrible stuff that's going on around the world? The ISIS holdovers in Africa, the Houthis, Hezbollah in Lebanon. At some point, we've got to actually ask ourselves, what is this about? So it's a Catholic teaching. It actually goes back to the 4th century with St. Augustine. He actually wrote up a beautiful document about it, Summa Theologiae. He talks about what a just war is. The damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation or community of nations must be lasting, grave, and certain. Okay, so let's just talk about that for a minute. Damage inflicted by the aggressor. If you want to look at it just from a Trump perspective, that would be the damage inflicted by Trump on Iran must be lasting, grave, and certain. So freeing the Iranian people from an oppressive theocracy, by no stretch of the imagination can that be considered grave. You just heard Rubio say, it is our hope that the Iranian people rise up, take back their country. So obviously that's not a part of the Trump doctrine. All other means of putting an end to it must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. Right up through Saturday night, we have the Iranian negotiations collapsing because they're insisting on a nuclear warhead. There must be serious prospects of success. If you look at an IRGC, and by the way, remember the targeting of the IRGC actually started in June of 25, where they were sending missiles into bedrooms, if you recall. But the prospects of success means, are we able to get rid of the IRGC? Well, now we not only have gotten rid of the leadership within the IRGC, their navy's at the bottom of the sea. They have no real military capability other than their direct army, and that isn't who Trump is targeting. He's not even targeting the Iranian army. He's targeting the IRGC, which is a different entity. And our continued strikes are on their interests, not the civilian interests. Trump talked about a whole human, what was the words? I can't remember, but he was talking about ending, he said it begins tonight, ending a whole era of society. Well, since 1979, the Persian people haven't had a society. They've been under this oppressive theocracy. So there's the prospects of success have to be laid out in our military process. And you've got Rubio, Hegseth, and Trump all singing from that same sheet of music. The use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. The power of modern means of destruction weighs very heavily in evaluating this condition. So here we are. The use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. Have you seen that? I haven't seen that. If anybody wants to challenge any of these four components, please join me in challenging that. I haven't seen any qualified proof that that is the case. They keep going after or highlighting the bombing of the school, and it always confused me that they would use that as the justification for questioning Trump, when in fact Trump has not attacked any civilian interests. He said it, the military said it, we've seen examples of how that's true. So who generally attacks civilian interests? It was always the terrorist elements, right? Wasn't the West. Let me take this a little bit further. St. Augustine provided comments on the morality of war from the Christian perspective, rallying against the love of violence and that war can engender. This is from the 4th century, by the way, as did several Arabic commentators in intellectual flourishing from the 9th to 12th centuries. But the most systemic exposition in Western tradition, and one that still attracts attention, is outlined by St. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century. In the Summa Theologiae, Aquinas presents our general outline of what becomes a traditional just war theory, and that's where you see these 4 points come up. He discusses not only the justification of war, but also the kinds of activity that are permissible for a Christian in war. Aquinas' thoughts became the model for later scholastics and jurists to expand and to gradually universalize beyond Christendom, notably, for instance, in relations with the peoples of America following European incursions into the continent. So in the 20th century, just war theory has undergone a revival, mainly in response to the intervention of nuclear weaponry and American involvement in the Vietnam War. Just so you know, this became what was behind the building of the Papal Audience Hall and the statue on the stage called the Resurrection. It was this imagery that was depicting, which you've seen me talk about in the past. The most important contemporary texts include Michael Walzer's Just and Unjust Wars. But you can keep going back, because since the attacks of 9/11, because St. Pope John Paul II was explicitly asked if it was just to go after the attackers of 9/11. And actually, Pope John Paul confirmed that. So we've now got examples of where an aggressor attacks innocent people, and it sets the stage for what becomes a just war. And unfortunately for many, we keep forgetting about that little nuance about how we don't have to sit and just take it. I know Christ and God loves, but nowhere does he say bend over. So now that we have this image that's been interpreted as messianic, even anti-Semitic, and Marjorie Taylor Greene called it the Antichrist. We now have enough information to start to generate a thoughtful discussion. Besides the, very hyperbolic reaction to it, let's talk about what this actually talks to. And what you end up getting is into the territory of what is called the Streisand effect, right? The Streisand effect, literally it creates a backlash or a backfire on what the comments are being made. So it's not just the visibility of the image, but the rapid expansion and the interpretation that everybody has used to reframe it as a blasphemous or even satanic image. Communities all over, whether it's not just on X, I've seen it on Facebook, many articles are being written about it, but they're all speculating as to what the meaning of that image is. And that usually is a sign that that's the distraction from what the real message is. But that said, now it's coming out as more, because that single post invited competing messages to come out. It invited the ability for people to start talking and not just react to, but actually start talking about what's going on here. So as I pointed out with the just war doctrine, the controversy now has evolved, and as intended, the intention is shifted beyond the image itself to what underlies this whole conflict. If you expose that underlying thought, we get to have a neat discussion. So now we've got a clash between two people, between the Pope and between Trump, the head of state. So you've got the religious moral framework against the state's application of what it takes to protect and defend. And so I find that fascinating, to be very honest. That we can go into more about that, but the fact of the matter is, now we're seeing a convergence of two of the three sides of the triangle, right? You got the religious or the informational side, what is often coined as the Vatican side of the triangle, and the governance side of the triangle. Now we're seeing a convergence, and I find that really fascinating because those two, there's an interplay there that you can't dismiss. So when we take this to the next step, and like I said, if we want to discuss just war, you've got to look at it from these four components right here. These are not just enumerating just war doctrine. It actually is the basis of all of the discussion we're watching come out today. So the Pope himself said that Trump's reason for the use of force likely fails key constraints, particularly and proportionally, and regarding the last resort option. So he pointed to civilian harm, right? He said that there are many sick, elderly children that are being victimized. But we're not going after civilians, and we're not striking civilian targets. So if you just step back for a second, it's obvious Pope isn't talking about Trump, but he's leveraging what Trump did to get a message out. And I think that's a fantastic way of doing this, because up until now, this discussion was within religious realms. It wasn't in mainstream. And I find that a missing piece that, thank God for Trump's bombastic post, because now it's in the public sphere. It's not just hidden in the religious and political realms. So now we've got his post, Trump's post, becoming the core and arguing that Iran represents a grave long-term threat. And as we highlighted with Rubio's video, they had an imminent threat that they actually informed the Gang of Eight about. So the logic of it is, if they had talked to the Gang of Eight twice before February 26th, in that week lead up, the Gang of Eight didn't say anything. The Gang of Eight didn't do anything. So in other words, the Gang of Eight was, at least from that perspective, agreeing with the briefing they got. It didn't come out until after the strike, when Schumer said, we're going to do a War Powers Act resolution, which failed, if you recall. So when we look at the last resort and proportionality part of it, we're looking at the Trump saying there's got to be diplomatic avenues that we can use. And so that really hits hard, because when you see this post and compare it to where people are wondering, are Trump's actions literally a war crime? Again, we're posing it as, what is a war crime? How is a war crime determined? If you go back to just war, you got 4 conditions that will determine if something is a war crime. But that discussion is now being had in a constructive way, or at least it should be. And that leaves us with this. This I find interesting. And I'll show this as I get through later in this, why this matters. Cardinal that's in Tehran was evacuated from Iran back in early March. Interesting. Right after, so February 26th is our strike, and he was evacuated No, he was evacuated in I believe in February. Yeah, he ordered joint strikes. Okay, widely unknown. Nobody knew where he was. He didn't get out until after the strike started. So it was in early March he was evacuated, and nobody knew where he was. He was in hiding. We got him out. And it's interesting because we actually did get him out, and I am pretty confident on that because Trump said we were over there getting thousands of people out of Iran and in the region where where the gravest risks were. So this past Saturday, Trump Leo urged the end of madness of war as Iran starts talks. This is Saturday, and on Saturday we had two people in the audience that I think is really interesting to talk about. Making a direct appeal to world leaders, he said, "Stop. It is time for peace. Sit at the table of dialogue and mediation, not the table where rearmament is planned." Okay, this is before the talks in Islamabad started to take place. And if you recall, those talks were going on for in excess of 20 hours. Well, it was before we found out about the results of the talks. They had been going on for over 20 hours, and it ended up where Vice President Vance walked out and came back to the U.S. because Iran would not put down the idea of a nuclear armament. And that takes us to today, because he said the delusion of omnipotence is fueling the U.S.-Israeli war in Iran. And he goes on to say, history's first, wait a minute, enough of the idolatry of self and money, Leo said. Enough of the display of power. Enough of war. Well, that's a broad statement. So what I found interesting is this. In the Basilica pews was the Archbishop of Tehran, the guy that was just evacuated, and the U.S. Diplomatic Corps Deputy Chief of Mission, Laura Hochul. The U.S. Embassy was represented in that audience. And I'm going to show you something here in a minute. Just keep yourself ready, because I think we're seeing another story come out. Christianity Today, threatening profound evil trivializes that evil. Well, wait a minute. As we look into what is actually happening, we're looking now at something that's going beyond the imagery of what we've been seeing underlying all this conflict. This is symbolizing something where it's actually more indicative of something bigger. The feud between the Trump and the Pope is actually exposing a pretty big conflict between two frameworks, one emphasizing decisive action, which is Trump, and the other one that's rooted in just war doctrine. So just war doctrine tells you to take a step back, breathe. Does this fit a Christian perspective? And decisive action says, well, we got to take immediate action. Seemingly it's being presented that there's no sunlight between the two perspectives. That there's a lot of sunlight, rather, that they're two diverging perspectives. And actually, they're not diverging perspectives. When you recognize that we've been planning this for a while. So, the framework itself is something that is important to understand, because it's not something that takes a long time to figure out. So, the best response, though, from this guy is The Spectator. The guy who runs The Spectator is a well-known public figure out of the UK. He's considered the political right. His name is Sir Walter. I can't remember his full name. I know I've got it up on a search engine, but he literally presented this as, his name is Sir Paul Marshall. He bought the Spectator in 2024, and he's considered a conservative, But when the best response to Trump is to pray for him. And then he immediately starts his screed by saying, imagine that Martin Luther had scrawled his 95 Theses on the back of a Denny's menu, nailed it to the doors of the nearest church, and you get the picture of Donald Trump's polemic against Pope Leo XIV. The president's true social rant against the Holy Father is highly offensive, of course. Show some respect for the Vicar of Christ, he says. This is said by an English guy, right? Who's not even of the same religion. That's not to mention the follow-up post in which we shared an AI-generated image of himself mocked up as Jesus Christ healing the sick. I take offense with people dismissing the biblical position here. I have been very upset all day. I wrote out, in fact, I posted it. There it is. I posted it out on my True Social post, and I think a lot of people need to step back again. Who defeats Satan? That's God, right? As a Catholic, we know this. I don't know about everybody else, but who does God work through to defeat Satan? We are the church. Through us, God will defeat Satan. And so we're now conflating faith with the imperfection of man, and that drives me crazy. And I think it's fair to have this discussion. And I realize for many who aren't Catholic, maybe I don't have the right to say it. Well, I'm going to say it anyway. God, through Trump, is healing our country, healing people, and he uses the righteous among us. And when I look at this, people think righteousness means perfect, flawless. That is not. Righteousness means that you have a right relationship with God. Doesn't mean you're perfect or flawless. Trump is not perfect. He's not flawless. But because of his relationship with God, God is able to work and move within him. So there's nothing wrong with the image of Trump healing, because he's recognizing himself as a vessel with which God can work through. And if you got a question about it, go back and read the Old Testament. How many times did the disciples walk among the people and heal them in the name of Jesus Christ? They healed them. At one point, holding a napkin that St. Paul, or a handkerchief that St. Paul had in his hand, healed somebody. His shadow healed another person. This is not a question of whether or not Trump is perfect. It's a question of whether or not his relationship with God is in a place where God can work and move within him. So let's put that one aside. Somebody obviously edited that photo, which is funny. I'll get into that in a minute. But if we want to really embody what that image is getting at, just go back and read the peace prayer of St. Francis. Make me an instrument of your peace. And read it and understand what that means. It's make me an instrument, make me the vessel by which peace and love and the understanding of healing can actually come through. That's all I'm talking about. And I'm really offended when people try to conflate that, because damn it, we're better than this. We've got to be better than this. And so Trump's image to me is neither offensive nor inappropriate. I hope you can see that. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your kind words on that one. That was my little soapbox rant. So the right now, the ceasefire is tenuous. Epic fury, Trump's opportunity for just war, president legacy. Again, this is an article that came out just last week. And it's talking about Trump is following just war doctrine. And who's saying this? It's not just anybody. This guy was the Inspector General at the Department of Defense. I think he carries a little weight, don't you think? And he said Thus far in Operation Epic Fury, U.S. President Donald Trump seems to be adhering religiously to just war doctrine. If we can conclude Epic Fury in a just war manner, he will earn his legacy as a just war president. Interesting. Christian just war doctrine builds upon the teaching of St. Augustine, goes into the history I just told you. To quote St. John Paul the Great in his 1997, he calls him the Great, I love that, Catechism of the Catholic Church, these are the 4 conditions of a just war. And this is from St. John Paul II. When I was Inspector General at the Department of Defense during wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, I routinely asked American military leaders if they can define for me exactly who the enemy is and what they knew about just war doctrine. As I was routinely disappointed with the answers, I compiled my unofficial just war notes of an Inspector General. Considering what's happening in Iran, I would add to my just war notes Pope John Paul II's concluding admonition to government leaders after summarizing the 4 traditional just war elements. The evaluation of those conditions for moral legitimacy belongs to the prudential judgment of those who have responsibility for the common good. It's not just the Pope. Our nation's 47th Commander-in-Chief can meet all 4 just war elements. When Trump announced military action against the regime in Iran on February 28th, he described the risk. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. This isn't even questioned, folks. We've known this. You have to be living under a rock not to know this. It was always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, this is Trump quoting, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. The president explained that efforts to negotiate a resolution have been ineffective. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions. We can't take it anymore. Within the 3rd element of just war documents, serious prospects of success is the need to know your enemy. Our president has identified our enemies. To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity. He said that a couple of times, if you recall. It's a long-standing military doctrine stemming from Sun Tzu's Art of War in the 5th century that to win wars, we need to know our enemy. As Sun Tzu wrote, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles. In his April 1st, 26 address to the nation, President Trump described the purpose of his speech as an update on the tremendous progress our warriors have made in Iran and discussed why Operation Epic Fury is necessary for the safety of America and security of the free world. He reiterated that Iranian fanatical regime has been chanting death to America, death to Israel for 47 years. This murderous regime also recently killed 45,000 of their own people. So who is this being targeted at? For those terrorists who have nuclear weapons would be an intolerable threat. Those 45,000 Iranian martyrs are not our enemies. Likewise, the remaining millions of good Iranian people are not our enemies. The Sun Tzu know your enemy definition of enemy is not an impersonal Iran. Our enemies are the military, live bodies called out by President Trump on the onset of Operation Epic Fury, the members of the IRGC, the armed forces, and all the police. The sooner we conclude a military surrender by those live bodies, the sooner we can end the thus far just war in Iran, called Operation Epic Fury, in a just war manner. If our commander-in-chief continues his adherence to the just war doctrine, focuses on defeating the live body, Iranian enemies of the American people, and concludes Operation Epic Fury without allowing the might of the American military to produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated, he will that's point number 4 of just war. He will maintain the support of the American people, win the war, and earn his legacy as the just war president. This is a beautifully written, well stated overview of what we're looking at. So we now have the frame, right? This is framing everything happening today. So we have another situation that's coming up because this, let it come back up, is where you start to see the wheat from the chaff get separated. So, like I said, Donald Trump posted this last night. And on Orthodox Easter, President Trump attacked the Pope because the Pope is rightfully against Trump's war in Iran. And then he posted the picture of himself as if he is replacing Jesus. No, he is not replacing Jesus. For heaven's sakes, people, get your head out of that dark and smelly orifice, because that is not what's happening here. God is working through him. And I really, like I said, this offends me to no end. This comes after last week's post of the evil tirade on Easter and then threatening to kill an entire civilization. I completely denounce this and I'm praying against it. This is Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who then put out, it's more than blasphemy, it's an antichrist spirit. Okay, so this is where the idiots stand up, because this is, for somebody who claims to be a Christian, this is a complete misread, and that's frustrating. So, turns out that this image is actually from a book that was never published, the exact image. And let me show it to you again. If you look, oh, I can't do it here. If you look, that image right there was replaced a Marine. And it comes from a book called The Last Pull. And this book, here's this, by the way, this is interesting. Here's the original with the Marine. Here it is replaced. Turns out the original photo was posted by Nick Adams, USA, but someone in the Trump camp decided it would be wise to alter it and add a demon and repost. I don't know that it was somebody in the Trump camp. Anyway, it comes from a book called The Last Pull. You see the image is the same. Some people have questioned, could that be St. Michael? I say no, because of the hooks on the wings. But it exists. What did this guy say? It exists. It's justly unfinished or unreleased. He took the credit about the book. It was in a group. He was asking for help with potholes and general writing help. It's gone now. So the original post is from a Reddit post, and this is the part of the book. He unfortunately didn't post the whole thing. He was asking for help in the writing of this book. And so it was up there, and it was then taken down. But it did exactly what I think it was supposed to do. It's gotten a conversation started. Now you can be smarter as to what just war is. So if Pope Leo is denouncing the delusion of omnipotence that fuels the U.S.-Israeli war in Iran, then you've got to ask, what is the delusion? Is the delusion about just war? Is the delusion something else? He said, Pope, over evening prayer, wait a minute. Enough of the idolatry of self and money, Leo said. Enough of the display of power. Enough of war. Idolatry of self and money. This is a post from April 11th. Obviously, doesn't refer to today's post that Trump put out last night. So obviously, this is something else. Who's idolizing self and money? Is that a fair question? Enough of the display of power, the display of war. So let me point out, remember I showed you in the pews, wait a minute, in the Basilica pews was the Archbishop of Tehran, which we showed you. He was evacuated from Iran. The U.S. was represented in the diplomatic corps by its Deputy Chief of Mission, Laura Hochul, of the U.S. Embassy. Check out what she's been doing. Laura Hochul, the Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy to the Holy See, has been a key diplomatic figure representing the United States during peace efforts surrounding the U.S.-Iran conflict. In other words, she's a back channel. She's a back channel. I hope you see that. She represented the U.S. diplomatic corps at the peace vigil led by Pope Leo on the 11th. And she has, during these religious services, Hochul was noted as a primary U.S. representative while the Pope delivered strong condemnations. Right? Delusion of omnipotence. In other words, it wasn't about Trump. Here's something that needs to be added to the picture. Right now, Europe is most at risk for what's going on in Iran. They refuse to help out. Quote, it was not their war. They actually started to backpedal and start to reintroduce green energy, more windmills, according to Starmer. They're talking about everything but dealing with the threat they helped create in Iran. So let's put this back in perspective. You got Zanjani, who's using illicit money to fund terrorism in the region. The Zanjani network has now been taken down. If you recall, a week ago, this past Thursday, we had UAE get rid of dozens of money changers who were using that Iranian shadow network. So, and then we got 2 days after that, you've got Soleimani's niece and grandniece are arrested and deported. They too were getting a stipend out of that Iranian shadow network. So here we have an issue. This is where the whole idea of the Brussels effect comes in. I told you about this the other night on Sean's show, where we talk about the global order. The rules of the global order is written out of Brussels, and it's enforced with the shadow banks, City of London's sticky power, what they call sticky power. It actually controls the pricing. It can make sure that the assets are allocated to those things that the global order has determined are primary. And things have changed a little bit because energy, trade, the markets, all of this conflict now is being seen through a U.S. lens because we control a lot of those commodities now. So where the City of London is the center for all those contracts and the legal infrastructure, one of the things you start to realize is we have an enabler level inside of the shadow banking system. And those enablers, wait a minute, where are they? This was not for today's show. Where's my, there it is. The enabler level are the people that set up these shadow banking entities. What's the word? I just lost the word, but they set up the offshore companies, right? They're front companies. They set up those front companies. You got lawyers, you got accountants, you got all these service providers that service the corporate and industrial effort. And it's invisible because of the way they're set up. It's invisible to enforcement. So where banks are the most heavily regulated entity on the planet, shadow networks are harder to regulate simply because they're hidden in the system. Or, when you put in a suspicious activity report, or what they call a SAR, when you put those in, it's based on a transaction. The hands that touch it aren't always known. And that's what this is getting down into. This is where we actually are coming into the whole idea of the Brussels effect. So where we're talking here is this is not even about Trump and the Pope. This is about Europe. This is about them getting on board to turn around and become a part of the solution. Stop the idolatry, as the Pope says, right? Stop the idolatry. Stop of self and money. Enough of the display of power. Enough of war. I hope this is making sense for people. If I'm not, please reiterate, because I'm happy to go even deeper, because what you've got here is the broader geopolitical tension. We are talking about the old guard, as we've always heard. the old guard being challenged. We've been watching that steadily for quite some time. I've documented it. I've shown it to you. I've proven it to you. This slide deck that I pulled those 2 slides from even goes even deeper to show how it's bringing the world to a financial brink, to see who cries chicken, right? So we're now in a place where the ability of the European Union to shape global norms isn't working. It isn't working at all. So the regulatory power has no impact. And it now looks even constrained by the realities we're looking at with Iran and the material constraints. There's a reason why Iran was able to keep that strait closed. Who issues the insurance for that region? Lloyd's of London. That's City of London. And if you just step up the risk, Lloyd's of London doesn't insure, you have effectively used the strait and insurance as a form of economic warfare, which is what they've been doing for decades. For decades. Trump hasn't been around this whole time. And we've had that strait closed down long before Trump. So where the West traditionally buckles under, now Trump is saying, no, it's time to stop what you've always done. It's time to use decisive action. Let's end this once and for all. And so enough of war rings loudly for the Pope. And with that, I hope, I know I'm short here, but I hope I've established a really thoughtful argument for you to consider. Somebody asked me, could this all be because of the Rothschilds being appointed to run the Vatican Bank? And I went, no. And so I sent him the truth about that, because I know many people didn't see this. We know about the Rothschild loans to the bank. Everybody knows about the Rothschild loans to the bank. This is out of my Vatican Decodes posts, if you have ever seen them. This is the rest of the story about those loans. It wasn't even negotiated between the Vatican and the Rothschilds. The deal was brokered between an Italian banker and the Rothschilds. And then there was a secret condition that if the Vatican tried to create or to refinance that loan, that the Rothschilds had to be the first to be told. But one of the things people didn't look at, a loan from the Rothschilds to the British in 1833, very similar loan. Vatican paid off their loan by the end of the 1800s. This British loan to compensate British slave owners after the UK abolished slavery wasn't paid until 2015. So for all of those that like to hang on the Rothschilds in the banking industry, somebody should be asking the British, why did it take 180 years to pay off that loan? Yet that conversation never comes up. So Trump ended with this. Let me play it.
Mr. President, did you post that picture of yourself depicted as Jesus Christ?
Well, it wasn't depicted. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support. And only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that? It's supposed to be me as a doctor making people better, and I do make people better. I make people a lot better. As an example, the 11,000, I understand your husband's going through treatment.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He's going through some very serious cancer treatment, so
yes, sir.
This goes a long way.
Yes, sir, it sure does.
Yeah.
Okay, I love Trump and his rhetoric. He's not wearing a doctor's robe, right? He's wearing priestly robes or Christ-like robes. For those who don't get it, God is healing us through the righteousness of those among us. Just because you think it says otherwise does not change the fact that we pray daily, that God works through us, and that we surrender our thoughts, words, and actions to his divine will. We are reminded to dedicate our entire day, including our prayers, works, joys, and sufferings, to Jesus, asking that every action be used for his purpose. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Please, guys, don't get caught up in the BS that conflates faith with man's imperfectedness. God uses us all. Righteousness is a state of being in a right relationship with God, not a state of being flawless. And that picture says it perfectly, despite the edits, by the way. And I brought up this. This is a famous statue. If you're a Catholic, you know the statue. It's called Our Lady of Grace. Notice she's standing on a snake. And I asked the simple question, is she defeating Satan? No. Who is Mary in the Catholic faith? She is the mother of the church, from the cross when Christ said, behold your mother. She is the mother of the church. Who is the church? You and I. So through you and I, through our faith, through our righteousness, God will defeat Satan. He uses us to defeat Satan. And I think one of the things you can hopefully come away with is, did you today do what you can to become a righteous member of God's army? And that's all I've got, because that is the rest of my story. So anybody have any comments, any questions? I will wait to see what comes up. But I do hope that this helps you to have a more blessed day. I gotta find a video. I'm gonna replay Trump. How's that?
Mr. President, did you post that picture of yourself depicted as Jesus Christ?
Well, it wasn't depicted. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support. And only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that? It's supposed to be me as a doctor making people better, and I do make people better. I make people a lot better. As an example, the 11,000, I understand your husband's going through treatment.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He's going through some very serious cancer treatment, so
yes, sir.
This goes a long way.
Yes, sir, it sure does.
Yeah.
Okay, I see him as a doctor, but not as the same doctor he's talking about. But anyway, before I go, I want to say thank you. Just Fed Up gifted a ship. Gosh. And Dixie gifted a set of shades. And Cheryl Cathy gifted a ship. I am so thankful to all of you. My banner, for some reason, doesn't look to be showing. If you like and support my work, also consider my Cash App or my Venmo. It's at $signal FeistyCat17. I appreciate all the help you can give me. Like and share this channel, because I am trying to get movement into my channel, and I've been doing a very bad job of it. So I could use your help, guys, and I really appreciate your time. With that, I hope you have a very blessed day. If you're not in my Telegram channel, please join it. We have great discussions every night. So with that, have a good day.
Whispers in the static, questions in the fire. unmasking the players in the shadowed game, where the silence breaks, the hidden shakes. She names the unspoken